What happens when creativity, cognitive science, and new technology meet in the classroom? In this summer short, we revisit powerful insights on innovative teaching from animation labs to multimedia learning and AI-enhanced instruction. Welcome to Speaking of Higher Ed, where we explore bold ideas and meaningful conversations in teaching and learning. I'm your host, Andrew Everett. This is episode 30 and our June summer shorts look back. These quick hit episodes revisit standout moments from past guests who helped us rethink how we engage students, design experiences, and use technology in the classroom. If you enjoy this podcast, please take a moment to rate, review, and share it with a colleague. We begin with Dr. Richard Mayer in episode 22. His decades of research shape how we design multimedia learning experiences. Dr. Mayer says the best lessons keep it simple, break things down, and get students involved. My colleague Arthur Takahashi has this conversation.
The multimedia principle, that's a good start, but it's not saying any graphic is helpful. We have to figure out what makes a helpful graphic, and also what makes helpful text. How should we design the text and the graphics? So yeah, that's how I've spent the last 4 decades. No, many decades trying to figure out. But I'll take just a step up from what are the best principles, because there's really like 3 objectives for these principles. One is what I would call reducing extraneous processing, because I think when you present information to students, in a lesson, on-screen lesson or a lecture or anything like that, it's very easy to overwhelm them with too much, or if you have poor instructional design, they waste a lot of their cognitive resources just trying to figure out what's going on. So the first idea is let's reduce extraneous processing. We don't want people to engage in cognitive processing that does not support the instructional goal. So one principle is what I call the coherence principle, which is in lots of books on how to teach, which is keep it simple. Don't put in things that are not directly relevant to the theme of the lesson. If it's not supporting the instructional objective, you don't need it in the lesson. So it's the idea sometimes less is more. People learn better if you focus on what your point is. So that's the coherence principle, kind of weed out extraneous material, both words and graphics. We tend to make graphics way too complicated and pretty with all kinds of colors and details. And sometimes just a simple line drawing conveys the idea a lot better. So that's the coherence principle, and that is in support of minimizing extraneous processing. And there are other ones too, like signaling, which is kind of pointing out the important material. The second kind of end goal is managing essential processing. So here the idea is sometimes you can only simplify a lesson so far. The material itself might be complicated, so we can't take out part of the lesson just because it's complicated. So if we're trying to teach something that's complicated and help people get that into their working memory, what can we do? So I call that managing essential processing. One thing we can do is use what I call the segmenting principle, which is to break a lesson into smaller parts and just go part by part by part. I see a lot of lessons where people will present a whole graphic of a whole system with all these different parts to it and then go back and explain each part. But that's kind of overwhelming. It would be better, I think, to just start with the first little part, make sure people understand that, then add the next part, then add the next part, and so on. That's the segmenting principle. And then the third is what I call fostering generative processing. So even if we design a perfect lesson, if students aren't motivated to try and make sense out of it, it's not going to work. So how do you motivate students to exert the effort to make sense out of a lesson? That's what fostering generative processing is about. So one way to do this that we discovered that I was quite surprised about was what I call the personalization principle. This is just using conversational language, like first and second person words like you and I and we, rather than just third person formal presentations. That improves learning. We also have the positivity principle, which is if the instructor uses positive gestures, positive facial expression, positive voice, that actually makes students feel more positive, but it also improves their learning outcomes. So those are just, and then there are generative learning activities where we can ask students to engage in activities during learning, like trying to explain something to someone else or summarize what they've just learned. So those are all techniques that I think are fostering generative processing.
Mayer reminds us that how we present information is just as important as what we teach. In episode 26, we talked with A.B. Osborne. He reflects on the complicated emotions around AI in the creative world and why mastering storytelling still matters more than ever.
You had all these different generative AI programs show up all at once, ChatGPT, DALL-E, all those. And of course, I'd been scared of it for a while. I feel every emotion on AI at all times. So, there's like that, oh no, what's this mean for our industry? And then also sometimes I'm impressed by it. Sometimes I'm like, well, the big takeaway with AI, especially in the world of generative AI right now, it's like you're giving a kid that, a whole team of workers and power tools and telling them to design a house. And if they don't have those raw storytelling fundamentals, I've never had an AI thing truly wow me on storytelling. Like I've been impressed with the end visuals a couple of times, but there's also still this very uncanny feeling to it. So I don't think the market is ready to adapt. We're not just hitting buttons and making whole movies right now. It's not there. It's not going to be there anytime soon. And I don't think there's a substitute for the craft of storytelling at the moment. At the same time, I'm still looking at this stuff going, wow, it's crazy what it can do. And certain jobs are probably going to pull back on the back burner, right? Most of my students their starting place is, I just want to be a concept artist. And it's like, okay, well, now you're competing with the AI. So we make sure that, if you say the word AI to art students, you're going to hear a hiss. You can hear the room, the shift of the room. And what they want to do is kind of duck their head in the sand. That's what they want to do. And so I make them try it and at least see what it can do. And I'm like, if you think you're better than this, make the case for it. And if not, maybe put other skills in the toolbox that the AI can't replicate. And that's usually our starting point, right? How do we make the case for ourselves? It can do some things very well. It's really good at that initial concepting phase. It's really good at what's called matte painting, where you paint out backgrounds in some movies. So instead of having a person hand paint things, you can just generate a prompt, and Photoshop has that built in now. So those things go away, but then there's a whole new world of like, well, you can't replicate all this other stuff yet. And until we're in that world, I would build your career more around those things. I mean, animations never stop changing. We went from 2D to 3D as our primary mode. We went from drawing on cells to 3D computer generated animation. It's sort of the nature of the medium to keep evolving. So staying up with that is the nature of the beast.
Even as technology evolves, it's the timeless skills like creativity, storytelling, and adaptability that keep students ahead. Let's look at how AI is reshaping higher ed now. In episode 27, Dr. Cynthia Alby explains how generative AI is reshaping higher education and why faculty must focus on creating meaningful learning and teaching integrity with real institutional support.
I think we just have to drastically increase our focus on two things. One, value. Because when the learning matters, students will do the work. When they see it as valuable and they want that learning, then you don't have to worry about cheating. The issues arise when students are asked to do things that they don't see as valuable. And so I really feel like moving into the future, we've got to do two things. Help students see the value, but also to make what we're asking of them increasingly valuable. And then that other piece, and again, we've talked about this a little, is teaching for integrity. I think that we have always imagined someone else was doing it. Someone in some previous grade or in some other class, and that we didn't have to maybe explicitly teach for integrity. But I think that is That was never true. It was always, I think, just being kind of pushed to the wayside by everyone. And we can't do that anymore. We all have to be weaving that into every course. What does it mean to develop integrity in students? Develop ethical thinking in students? Yeah, definitely. There's a new book coming out that the subtitle, I think, is Teaching for Integrity. It's called The Opposite of Cheating. It's just coming out this month. Tricia Bertram Gallant is one of the authors. And I think from the podcasts and so forth that I've heard with her, I think it's going to be an incredible book. But also, I think as we look to the future, institutions are going to really have to think about providing faculty with release time or paid summer time, plus support to make this happen. It's not reasonable to think that this, which I would say is the most massive disruptor in my career, it's not reasonable to think that faculty are just going to kind of figure it out when they're already overwhelmed. And now I've got to figure this out too. I'm struggling, and I'm an expert at pedagogy, at course design. So if I'm struggling, how much more so are probably other people struggling? And really, what they need is time and support. And institutions are going to have to provide that, or it's going to be ugly.
As AI reshapes education, faculty need time, support, and new strategies to keep learning meaningful. Thanks for listening to Speaking of Higher Ed. We hope these moments sparked new ideas for your teaching. You can listen to the full conversations at augusta.edu/innovation and continue the conversation with us on Facebook at facebook.com/AUGCII. Speaking of Higher Ed is produced by the Center for Instructional Innovation at Augusta University.